I just wanted to make sure you were recording. Yeah, you did it. Recording because because Blas isn't going to be here and it's his turn to do the minutes.
Oh.
So I told him I clicked the pertinent stuff, but he still had to do the minutes because it's his turn.
All right. Well, let's see, 7:05. Whoops. I'm not sure. Got one more I got to admit in here. Yeah, Zoom changed the thing. I used to be able to just let everybody in, but now you have to admit them in individually.
Okay.
Which is kind of a booger. All right. What else are we missing here? Carol, I thought you'd be really busy about this time of year.
Well, I have started become a watcher in politics.
Okay. And Bob, I talked to Don Babs about your Milwee thing, and I'm going to send him some information, see if he's got something he can fill in some holes for us.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Since you two are related somehow, I don't know. I wouldn't claim it though if I were you. All right, well, it's 7:06. We'll go ahead and get started then. Call this meeting to order. In that case, Chaplain Babs, have you brought us some words of encouragement, sir?
Just pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come humbly before you this evening, asking your blessings on each one of us who are attending this meeting by Zoom. We acknowledge that we are living in perilous times as we see the destruction and the lawless behavior of many who are bent on destroying personal property and tearing down of our national monuments, and even attacking those who are in opposition to their agenda. We who are descendants of patriot ancestors who lost their fortunes and livelihood in order that we might have this great free nation in which to live and raise our families in a safe and secure environment. We know that everything has a purpose and that you allow things that are at times confusing to us. But we acknowledge your omnipotent and omniscient acts in the lives of we, your people. We ask that you give us wisdom and the ability to see the big picture as we try to make sense of all that is occurring today in our nation. We, the sons of the American Revolution, have committed to the furtherance of the history of this great nation with your help. We are today at a time in our chapter that we are making choices for the choosing those who will lead us through the next year. We ask that you give us the wisdom to make the right decisions. We ask that you be with those who are not here with us this evening, whether it be for illness or some other reason. We ask that during this difficult period of this deadly pandemic, that you will protect each of us and our families as well. And all of this we ask in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Let's see. Let me get this going. Come back here. Why did that thing move? Sorry, I'm trying to readjust my picture and all of a sudden it just went completely bonkers. Great. Sorry guys, I'm trying to get back to my list here and it just went, as soon as I did screen share, it went crazy on me. I'll tell you what, let me stop share for just a minute, get everybody back. All right. Nathan, can you lead us in our pledge, please, sir? You might have to unmute. I think I muted you, Nathan. There you go.
Okay. All right, and you wanted me to do which, the
to the American flag. Is that what I'm
right.
showing there? But I got the right one up.
what do you do?
You've got the right one.
That's
Okay.
Join me, please. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
To the
to the
to the
flag
flag of the
of the
United
United
States
United
of America,
States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
which it
one
stands,
nation, under
one
God,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
All right, looks like Louis is not with us tonight. Whoops, wrong one. Gotta get the right one here. There we go. All right, so I guess I'll go ahead and do this one real quick. Honor the Texas flag.
Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas,
Texas,
one state under God,
God,
one
one
and indivisible.
And then Sergeant of Arms McClellan, if you would please, whoops.
Please join me in the pledge for the SAR. Quote, we, descendants of the heroes of the American Revolution, who by their sacrifices established the United States of America, reaffirm our faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic, and solemnly pledge ourselves to defend them against every foe.
All right, thank you. Ta-da. All right, got everybody back now. All right, and so tonight we have one of our own SAR Texas past presidents, Tom Green. Now we'll let Pete McClellan introduce him, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's definitely my honor tonight to introduce Thomas Bruce Green III, who is in our midst, and he is down in Pearland, Texas, as we speak. And I've asked Tom to join us tonight because I have the utmost respect and admiration for Tom and his commitment to the Texas Society Sons of the American Revolution. And I've known Tom since about 2005 or 6. And he's always impressed me as somebody who's totally dedicated and committed to the principles of the SAR and acts accordingly. Interesting background. Tom is a native Texan, born in the Athens, Texas area, and finished high school in Maybank and attended the North Texas University, also known as NTU in Denton, graduated in 1961 and from North Texas State University. He married Margot, his wife, who is from New Braunfels, and in fact, they lived there for a while. And Tom, after graduating, was entered into the United States Navy Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. And Tom, after graduation from OCS, he attended the United States Navy Deep Sea Diving School in the Washington, D.C. area for a 6-month course in deep sea salvage diving, and which comes in handy because he's also an admiral in the Texas Navy, which a lot of people don't know. But Tom was commissioned as a first lieutenant, or he ended up as a first lieutenant, gunnery officer, and navigator on the USS Piedmont, which at that time was the oldest commissioned ship in the United States Navy and had been the flagship of Fleet Admiral, quote, Bull Halsey after World War II ended. Tom has had an extensive career in the department store retail business, becoming the operating manager for one of Burdine's department stores in Miami, Florida, where he supervised the building, staffing, and stocking of 3 Burdine department stores, which ultimately became Macy's stores. And in 1972, he came back to Maybank, where his father had operated a family grocery store for 26 years and assisted his father in the operation of the store until 1978, when his dad retired, and they sold the 3rd generation family business. Tom then returned to the department store business in Dallas serving as operating manager of a Joski's department store before all these stores also became Macy's. Tom is active in both the SAR and the Sons of the Republic of Texas. And then after retiring, he spends much of his time promoting these two societies. Interesting, Tom has a number of awards. He was inducted as a Knight of the Order of San Jacinto at the annual convention of the SRT in 2006, the highest award of the SRT, which was started in 1843 by President Sam Houston during the Republic of Texas days. Tom was named Texan of the Year by the San Jacinto Descendants Society and was awarded the National Merit Award by the Freedom Foundation of Valley Forge in 2007. And in 2016, he was awarded the San Jacinto Star Award by the San Jacinto SRT Chapter. Tom is a colonel in the Texas Army since 2006 and was also appointed an admiral in the Texas Navy by Governor Perry in 2006. In 2012, Tom was awarded the George Washington Distinguished Service Award by the Paul Carrington SAR Chapter and named the National Color Guardsman of the Year by the National Society Sons of the American Revolution. Tom is also a member of the General Society of the War of 1812, the American Legion, and the North American Vexillological Association, I'm surprised I can say that, the study of flags, and has collected or made over 75 historic flags of both the American Revolutionary and the Texas Revolutionary periods, and has given more than 750 historic flag programs to the SRT, the DRT, the SAR, and the DAR chapters, as well as historical societies, civic groups, family and professional associations, and more than 30,000 school children around the state of Texas and other states. His knowledge of flag history is considerable. However, he always enjoys hearing a new story about the flags from the audience. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Tom Green.
And Tom, you'll need to unmute. You're muted, Tom. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
You bet.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. I decided that what I would do tonight is just give you more detail on some of the flags instead of all of them like I normally do the school children. It's interesting, this epidemic we're having. Boy, they don't want me in the schools, and they don't want the children there either. So it's been quite interesting. Can all of you see this flag? That's the flag that George Washington first raised on January the 1st, 1776 in Prospect Hill, middle of Harvard University. And I finally got to see the area. They don't use this flag anymore. They use the American flag. This was never the official flag of the United States, but it was considered the flag of the United States. When he first raised it there at Prospect Hill, you could see it all the way to Boston, which was more like an island, really, at that time. And they thought he had retired. They thought he had surrendered. And you can see why by looking at the King's colors. Now, that's not the same thing as the British emblem is today, because Ireland had not become a part of the Great Union until 1806. So this is called the King's colors. It's the St. George Cross for England, which they say King George slew a dragon, so it's pretty old. I'm seeing dragons lately. And then the X through it is the Swedish St. Andrew's cross of Scotland. So the king that the Bible is named after put the two together and started the King's colors in an attempt to stop the people from Ireland or from Scotland from killing the people from England and vice versa. Now, the flag that really started the whole thing started in 1765, 10 years before the American Revolution even got started. And what was it all about? Do all of you know the story of that? I don't have a little one of it, but it looks much like the bottom of this flag, except it only has 9 stripes. Now, they think it has something to do with the East India Tea Company flag, which East England had captured different provinces in India. And when it had 9, it had all different kinds. It had 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It had just gotten the 13th flag colony, so it had 13 stripes on it. So that's why they think maybe it came from the East India Tea Company. The problem with that is that nobody over here knew much about the East India Tea Company, so there was no flag like this over here. The bottom part that started the whole thing only had 9 stripes. Well, that kind of gives a little more credence to the idea of the East India Company, because it had a 9-stripe flag at one time. So those are some of the stories behind the Grand Union flag. It's called, or the King's colors. Margaret Manny, who supposedly made the flag. It was a secret meeting, so they really don't know too much about what happened. 1765, and they think maybe 9 colonies came together in New York for a secret meeting of what they called then the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty got started because of Isaac Barre, the little town of Barre in Vermont is named Bar, Vermont. They don't know how to pronounce the French word. He was a Scotsman who got very upset with the other parliamentarians in England, who called them the sons of iniquity and different things like that, derogatory term. He said, that's not true. They were sons of liberty. And that became so popular that the daughters and the sons both were started at that period of time. They had flagpoles that went up way up into the air. There was a lot of trees. They were cut down by the English. The last tree they think was cut down was in Boston. And there are the large trees. And when you go to New England today, you still see some of the trees, some of the poles, the Liberty poles there. The Alfred was the first ship of the Texas Navy, which the anniversary was just a couple of days ago, the 13th of October. Nathan, you probably know that, don't you? That was, and I saw nothing on TV about it. Trump is always they hear about on TV. But the Alfred was the first ship of the American Navy, and they flew this flag over it, and supposedly the Lieutenant John Paul Jones raised the flag for the first time. And he was a lieutenant when he first started in America because he didn't have much of a reputation over here. His name was really John Paul, but he had killed a man in the Caribbean. So he assumed the name of Jones, John Paul Jones. I thought, well, that's kind of silly, because it was pretty obvious who he was. But he was wanted in a couple of places in the Caribbean and also back in Scotland. But he had learned to navigate already, which was quite a chore for the people in those days with a sailing ship. So the Alfred had flown this same flag on it, and John Paul Jones had raised it on the 13th of December, 1875. So that gives a lot of argument to the idea that it existed long before. The lady that we all know about, Betsy Ross, supposedly designed this flag. We don't really have much proof of that, but everybody pretty well believes it. William Canby, her grandson, gave a very scholarly talk before the Philadelphia Historical Society in 1876, 100 years after the Battle of San Jacinto and different battles of the American Revolution. And she's really noted for 2 things, I think. I don't think she knew much about making flags. She didn't know anything about the stars because she was probably had a little education. So I have in my uniform a star and you can fold a piece of paper and cut it with one snip of the shears, as she called it, and make a 5-pointed star. So she did not realize that all the stars had a minimum of 6 points. It wasn't even called a star if it had 5 points. It was a spur rail. And so, but she didn't know all that. She didn't know anything about making flags. Her husband had been killed. Her name was really Grisham. Her husband had been killed when the black powder blew up in the magazine. And so when George Washington went to see her, that was quite unusual for him to see her, although he knew her from the church. She had married a son of a Protestant minister. And they kicked her out of the Quaker church. So her seat was, you remember they had little separate seats in those days. She had a separate seat right next to George Washington. So and none of his clothes ever fit him. He was a great big man for the day. And so she tailored cut his shirts and different things so they knew each other. But still, what was he doing going to see a person who had never made a flag when he was losing the war? I have a lot of trouble with that. But there's also quite a bit of evidence that William Canby provided. He had several affidavits by her children, her youngest daughter and her granddaughter, both helped her make the flag, and they talked about it in the affidavit that he presented that day. And so there's several people that did it. There were 2 other men that came with George Washington when they went to see Betsy Ross. I believed it was sometime in March of 1775. And probably George Washington had a 6-pointed star on a flag. That's what we don't know where the stars come from. We only talk about the stripes, really, the Sons of Liberty stripes. But none of the flags had stars on them at that time. So when Betsy Ross showed him how to make the star, he said, "Well, I need the flag the next day, the next morning." So she tried to make the flag, and she could make the stars, the 5-point stars, a lot faster, and they would be the same size. So she could sew 26 of them, knit them onto a flag pretty fast. One of the people that was with her was Roger Morris. He was the financier of the Revolution. His wife, when he got home, he told her about it, and she said, "I know Betsy Ross. I'm going to help her and go over and sew the stars on the flag." So that gives a little bit of credence to the story. Her daughter saved the dress that she wore, and it's in a museum in St. Paul, Minneapolis area. There's several people that claim they made the first flag. The most famous is Robert Carson. He was a member of the Continental Congress, and he was an artist. And he tried to get paid for making the first flag, and they wouldn't pay him. They kept delaying it, and all he was trying to get was a quarter of a keg of rum. So there was a great deal of interest in the flag. Most of it came later. We didn't know who Betsy Ross or any of the people of the famous period were. John Paul Jones was about the only one that lasted very long. And he was really an interesting fellow. The Battle of Saratoga, I believe, was the most important battle of the American Revolution because it got the French involved in the war, physically involved. They had been involved before with their money, but they actually sent Rochambeau and 6,000 troops over here, and that was a big help to Washington. Washington was never happy about the number of people that he could get to serve in the Revolution. He started a regular army, and they called it a Continental Army, but it didn't go too well. The people all liked a militia. They thought a militia was fine. That's what the Second Amendment is about, the argument between George Washington and the colonists about whether to have a first army, a regular army, or a militia. He didn't like the militia because the people were always going home. They were always leaving. In fact, some of the states had rules that they could only serve 3 months. And they had to go back and plant the crop or harvest it, whatever the case was. So that's what he was thinking about when he crossed the Delaware River at Yorktown. He was going to lose most of his militia, his army, in a couple of weeks, in just less than a week. So on Christmas Day, Christmas night, 1776, they crossed the Delaware River. You may have heard about the Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court. They asked a Texas student about that, and he said, well, that was what Washington discussed with his men on how they crossed the Delaware River, whether they're going to wade or row across. That's a joke, so I can see a couple of you laughing. When Bunker Hill got started, that was the most advantageous war of the American Revolution. More British were killed in the Battle of Bunker Hill than any other. Now, where was Bunker Hill fought? Where was the Battle of Bunker Hill fought? I always ask the school children, and most of them don't know. It was fought on Breed's Hill. The musket wouldn't shoot very far. It was a very ineffective weapon. And so they got down closer so they could shoot the British. They just accommodated them enormously. They landed on the mainland of the island, of the continent there, and just marched right into the fire and killed about 1,000 of the British in that. But we ran out of black powder shooting British, so they had to leave. Now there were only about probably 3,000 or 4,000 left. They had been as many as 20,000 militia had gathered when the British attacked Concord and Lexington, but most of them had gone home. So who was left? Mostly Irish people who had just come over, who had no home, no family. They were homeless people basically, and there was about 16,000 of them that Washington took control of as commander-in-chief. And that's where he hated the militia because of the problems he had. One of the things that happened in Bunker Hill, who was his, you remember who his general was that had never had any experience at all? He's just a book salesman is all he was. He owned his own bookstore. He went to Lake Ticonderoga and went to the cannons, and he brought 80 cannons to Boston. That's an amazing accomplishment. I don't know how in the world he ever did that. And they put them on top of Dorchester Heights, and it was higher than the ships could train the cannons. So the British left from Boston, and so he got the Congressional Medal of Honor, which I have a copy of here. And he was given the first honor. Now he didn't receive it because there wasn't anybody that could make it in the United States. Thomas Jefferson had it made in France years later, and finally they did give it to him there. He did, by the way, post some of the medals on the uniforms. He made a heart-shaped ribbon, and he gave it to 3 sergeants in Newport, Kentucky, after the war was over with. John Trumbull painted the picture of General Warren, who was killed in the Battle of Lexington, Bunker Hill. This is the flag that flies on Bunker Hill at the museum there. Notice it has a St. George cross in it. It has the pine tree in there. The pine tree, a lot of children can't see it. They think it's just something dirt on the flag or whatever. Pine tree was real important. Most of the British ships, they'd used all the trees of any size in England long before that. So you can imagine how much they liked the forest when they saw it over here. The problem with this flag is it probably is not the flag that flew over Bunker Hill or Breed's Hill. And that's because it's a blue flag. They had a white, a red, and a blue navy. England had the largest navy in the world at the time. But most of the ships over here had the red flag on, the St. Anne's Cross. And they think this flag flew over Bunker Hill. And the reason they think it is because it was in the portrait that Joseph Trumbull did, of the death of General Warren. Now the cross, notice, is missing in this flag, and the tree is a lot larger. They think the cross is missing because of what was the guy's name that started that founded Rhode Island? Got his name down here somewhere, Roger Williams. Roger Williams came to America in 1635, long time before the American Revolution. And he was kicked out of Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was given 30 lashes and run out of the colony, and he formed Newport, Rhode Island at that time. Now, what he preached was what we think of today as appropriate religion, to be respectful of other religions. And he preached that, and they didn't like that. You had to belong to that church, that religion and that church, and you had to own some land to be able to vote. Only about 6 or 7% of the people could vote in those days, and they all had land. Plus, they had to belong to whatever church each colony claimed as their own colony. Now, the most common flag that you see today is a come and take it flag. You've probably seen that flying on some of your neighbors' houses. I've stopped and asked several people if they know anything about the flag, and they don't. They just get it because they like it. They think it's a good political flag. Christopher Gadsden had become the head of the Navy Committee, and he's the one that had this flag made. They gave it to Ezekiel Hopkins, the first Commodore of the American Navy. He only had 3 or 4 little ships. Alfred was the first. And Lieutenant John Paul Jones said he flew this flag the first time on the Alfred. So that's what it's all about. Now, his grandson purchased the land on the southern part of New Mexico and Arizona to build a train on, to put a train track on during after the Texas Revolution, after Texas defeated Mexico. I was going to go to my favorite flag. That's this one. It's considered to be the oldest Stars and Stripes flag in America. And a lot of people, the flag that's in the museum in Bennington is not old enough, so they discredit this flag. I don't think that's accurate, because there's too many things that tend to talk about this flag. One thing is that you start with a red stripe, not the white stripe. So that's a little bit different. And plus, the fact that the one they have there in the museum in Bennington, Vermont is not old enough doesn't mean there wasn't another flag that was older that finally deteriorated. The grandfather, the 13th president, carried this in the Battle of Bennington. Does anybody know who that was? I asked all the school children, and I think maybe 1 or 2 over the years has known that Millard Fairchild was the 13th president. He was a vice president and became president and didn't want to run and didn't want to be president. So nobody's ever heard much about him.
Hey, Tom, what do those 11 stars represent?
Well, there's 13 of them. If you count them all, the 2 up in the top.
Oh, I see. Okay, I missed those.
Now, Vermont was not one of the 13. It was the 14th colony. And Vermont was called most people called it the New Hampshire Grants in those days. New Hampshire claimed it. That's why the angle is cut in the 2 flags up there, the 2 states up there. But New York claimed it also. And so the guy that has the oldest furniture store, what's his name? Can't remember his name. I had a stroke not too long ago, and I can't remember anybody's name, so I had to write all the things down. I didn't write his name down. He was not really there for the Battle of Bennington. And Seth Warner, his cousin, brought the Green Mountain Boys down. The Green Mountain Boys brought this flag down. And it's probably one of the ugliest flags that I've ever seen. Women would say you never mix those 2 colors together. The only part you see of the flag that's left in the museum is this part, and it is old enough to have existed at that time. That's that. So anyway, that was a major deal, because those were German mercenary troops. They went back across the Hudson River from Bennington, Vermont, and told General John de Burgoyne, the British general who had come down from Canada. He was supposed to meet up with General Howe in Albany, New York, but General Howe decided to capture Philadelphia at the time and didn't bother on telling General John McGowan. So McGowan had run out of supplies, and when the Battle of Bennington took place, that's what it was all about, to get the supplies. And so when he came back over and told him, and then who was the hero of the Battle of Saratoga? Benjamin Arnold. And he was wounded badly in the leg there. He never got over it. And he often said that he wished he'd been killed at Saratoga, and I wish he had too, because he'd been a big hero. Johnny, the British general, which was called Granny Gates, Horatio Gates, had been a British general and converted over to become an American general. He and Charles Lee had both been generals in the British Army and were never trusted by George Washington. General Lee was in charge in Norfolk, Virginia, when he had to surrender down there. That was the biggest loss of. I think we lost about 8,000 troops at that time. And my ancestor, Thomas Green, was involved in that battle. He was a militiaman, so they had him sign, and he got to go home. But he had to sign a chit that said he would not get involved again, and he did, or immediately became involved in another battle. John Paul Jones was very popular when he got to France. He went over there because he was a good friend of Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was our most important delegate at the time, and he ran things from at night from the bars and things. That's why he made the glasses, so he could see what people were saying. He could read lips, and they could speak fluent French. So he and John Adams, when he came over there, just thought it was terrible. He didn't think it was appropriate at all, the way they ran the government. And everybody had a mistress, and it was a mess all there. But John Paul Jones joined in all that, and he was very popular over there. So the French king gave him a ship, and he named it after Poor Richard's Almanac, which is what Benjamin Franklin had written and been the editor of before. So they named it after they gave it a French name for Poor Richard's Almanac. That was Bonhomme Richard. It was not a really good Navy ship. It was a merchant ship that had been converted, and it had a bunch of cannons. They got into a battle. He was the only person, John Paul Jones was the only person who ever landed and attacked the mainland of England during the American Revolution. Nobody else even got over here. And he was over there because of his involvement with the Ranger. He come over on the Ranger and told Ben Franklin about the victory of Saratoga. So that was all important. So during the battle that he got involved with on the Bonhomme Richard, he attacked the Serapis, which was the newest British ship at the time, and it just destroyed the Bonhomme Richard. So Ben Franklin charged the ship and tangled it up in the network. And the Marines at that time, their position during general quarters was up in the rigging, because the purpose of the Marines was originally to protect the captain of the ship they were on, and they would shoot the crew because the crew didn't like the captain, and so that's what the Marines were for. But because they were up in the rigging, they were able to shoot down at the treksul. So they killed all of the British officers on the treksul. So before all that happened, while they were trying to kill them all, John Paul Jones was asked by the British captain that he struck the colors, that he pulled the color down, he surrendered. And you know what he said? He said, "I've not yet begun to fight." Now, I was in the Navy as Nathan was, and I don't think that's what he said. I think there would be some profanity involved in what he replied, because he was in a bad shape. They managed to get over and attack the treksul, and they transferred to the treksul and watched the Bonhomme Richard sink, because it had been shot up so badly during the battle. There were 3 or 4 other ships involved, the French ships, but the captains didn't get involved, and one of them actually fired at the Bonhomme Richard one time. So they went into Trexel Holland. Holland was neutral at the time, And John Paul Jones continued his philandering, and everybody liked him pretty much. So they wanted him to leave. He said, well, I can't leave because we don't know what the flag looked like. Now, that gives a little bit of credence to Betsy Ross and the American flag. So they couldn't communicate with Benjamin Franklin, and they couldn't even communicate with England. So they used the Finnish ambassador, and they wrote in Finnish, what is the American flag look like? And they sent it to France, they translated it into English, gave it to Ben Franklin. He didn't know. So he wrote a letter to the American consul in America. Imagine that took about 3 months to get that word back. It got translated again back into French, to Finnish, and translated, and this became the flag that John Paul Jones used to bring the ship home, the Texan ship. So I call it the Texan flag. If you can find any semblance of surrender there, or anything that shows a repetitive action, I'd like to know it. Look at the stars; they have 8 or 9 points on them, and the stripes. The stars the stripes don't show any semblance of order whatsoever. So I don't. That's why most people have never seen it. When they later on, when Teddy Roosevelt became president of the United States, he was a big supporter of the Navy. You know, he'd been the Secretary of Navy for a while. So he wanted to find John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones had left the United States because they didn't have a Navy, couldn't afford to keep one. So he had worked for the Russians for a while. And he'd retired and died and was buried in Paris somewhere. But they didn't know where he was. So Teddy Roosevelt, President Teddy Roosevelt, wanted to find him and bring him, exhume his body and bring him back. So he gave that short to the ambassador to France, who didn't think it was too important, but Teddy Roosevelt told him that it was important. So he finally found the burial site, and when they opened it, the casket had been lined in lead and it was full of alcohol. They said there was a smile still on John Paul Jones's face from being buried in the house. Another joke there. They brought him back to the United States, and when they got pretty close to the shoreline, Teddy Roosevelt sent the American Navy out, all the ships. They had the water cannons going, and they escorted his body into Annapolis, Maryland, and he's buried in a sarcophagus underneath the church there, the chapel in Washington. It's the most elaborate burial site I've ever seen. So I would encourage you to take a look at it when you're there. That's about all I decided. Do any of you want to ask a question about any of them?
Tom, it's very interesting, and we really appreciate the time and effort that you put forth on our behalf. But I also have a question for you.
Okay.
How many consecutive years has it been that you've gone down to Laredo to celebrate Washington's birthday?
Well, we didn't go this last year. This was the first year we didn't go in about 11 years, I think. David, I think you came last year, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah, that was your first year.
Maybe you could share with the rest of the folks in the chapter what that program is all about.
Well, they started it about, longer in 1800, 1896, I think it was. They started the idea as about the protection of the red man. That had turned into an organization much like the NCAAP has. And so they started with that, and it turned into the Washington Parade later. And they've been doing it since 1896. So it's quite a little deal. It takes the entire town to have the parade. And it's really the most elaborate thing you've ever seen. People camp out to be able to get seats, and they stand up and salute you, and it's really something to go to.
How
David,
long is the parade?
It's about 3 hours. I remember one year we were pretty close to the end of the parade. They rotate you around, and the people were still there. Not all of them, but most of them were still there. we were in several other parades. We were in parade in Dallas one time, and there was hardly anybody there. There were more people in the parade than there was watching it. And we did the parade in Corpus Christi one year, the Buccaneer parade, and the people were cooking. They didn't pay attention to the parade at all. But that's not the same
Now, the other thing that I've noted about you, Tom, when I was active at Texas Society meetings, BOMs, that you were largely instrumental for maintaining the high level of contact with the DAR. And maybe you could share with us some of the
I've served as a liaison
interactions you've had.
DAR. Yeah, I've served with the liaison with the DAR for a number of years. And I have a lot of friends in the SA and the DAR now, and they help us. I do work on, I do about 1 or 2 a week. Most of them come from those ladies from the DAR. We've got a lady now in Liberty City, Atlanta City. It's up near Shreveport. She's trying to start an SAR chapter. And she sent me about 8 or 10 people. They're scattered all over the world, of course, but she's trying to get a chapter started. And that's because of I go to their meeting every year, their annual meeting, and have a table there.
Tom, this is Nathan.
Nathan?
Of course, I've known you for many years, but I learned something new with Pete's introduction of you tonight. What year were you at OCS?
61. I had my 21st birthday on November the 17th, July the 17th, 1961. That was the day I started. They made me the assistant section leader and told me to march the troops to Echo. I had no idea what to do, how to do it, or anything. I had that band. That was my only military training. So we marched around for about 30 minutes till we finally figured out each of the barracks had a letter on them. We finally figured out Echo meant for E. So we finally went to the Echo. They said, "Where in the world have y'all been?" I said, "All over the place."
Well, I was 5 years behind you. I was in Newport, OCS in 1966.
Yeah, you were a little bit behind me.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing about New Orleans, about Rhode Island, is it was really started as Newport, and it wasn't really a big colony, and they took it all away from him anyway. He was very popular. Roger Williams was very popular, but Nathaniel Green's grandfather was the president, was one of the founders of the town. So I always grew up thinking I was kin to Nathaniel Green, but I'm not kin to him at all. His wife was born on the little island that was off the coast of Newport, Rhode Island. And I never saw it the entire time we were there because it was foggy every day, all the time. Any other questions anybody's got? You'll have to
Tom, I want to thank you for being here, as you've been perennially available for SAR programs. And that's great.
Tom?
It's been really sad that nobody wants you to be here anymore. Go ahead, James.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
I made this. This is hand sewn.
That's the
colors, and you know that I, AKA John Trumbull, and while you were drawing, I'll email this to you.
I'm sure most of you saw the magazine last month of National. It had Jim's drawings in it. How you doing, Jim? Good to see you, buddy.
You're the reason I did this tonight. I haven't eaten yet because I wanted to see my old friend Tom. One past thing is
He's done it. Jim's done a couple of programs with me. First time I ever saw Jim, he and his wife were doing a program down in Lake Jackson.
Right.
I didn't find it. I was late getting there.
I was going to say, for those that are recent to the SAR, back in the old days, and Nathan will remember this, is that there were two people that they always tried to get stop talking in the meetings,
Yeah.
you and me.
They used to read the rules that everybody could have 2 minutes except Tom Green.
It's really
Hey,
great.
Tom,
to see.
Nathan, since you both went to the Newport for OCS, did you ever visit the Revolutionary War battlefields in Newport?
A little bit, but I didn't know anything about history at the time. We did go out and eat a lobster. I had to have a book to figure out how to eat it. We went to the 17-mile row where all the famous houses are. But I didn't know anything about history at the time.
That's about the same situation with me. We were concentrating on
Surviving?
modern
Surviving,
Navy
yeah.
concerned with the revolution at the time.
You had to have a 2.5 average after the first month or they'd kick you out, or you had to chip paint then for 2 years.
You had
Yeah,
to-
well-
they would roll you out to the fleet, as we said.
Yeah. So
Well-
I remember I got with it. I thought, Lord, how in the world could Evelyn Wood couldn't even read all that stuff that fast?
Yeah, the British were tied
Well, it's
up.
been my pleasure to.
Yeah, the British were tied up around Newport and Rhode Island trying to get because there were so many privateers, smugglers coming out of Providence.
That's where they,
Tied up.
yeah, that's where they came from.
Yep, it tied up some of the British fleet and kept them away. So when the French came to help us out, they didn't have to fight the British fleet.
That's why they went to Newport. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Hey,
Rochambeau.
Tom, I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
How did the University of North Texas come up with the motto, Mean Joe Green?
Well, Joe Green came about the time Nathan did, I guess. He was a little after I
Well,
was.
Joe Green came along, and then he was so ferocious that they called him Mean Joe.
Yeah.
And
I could have sworn that was Tom.
well,
Abner Haynes was our star when I was up there. North Texas didn't have much of a football team, it wasn't too good. But Abner Haynes was a lot better than everybody else, so we won the Missouri Valley Conference that year. Jim, good to see you, buddy. How you feeling?
Good. And you?
Good, good. Yeah, I'm feeling better than I sound.
Tom, thank you very,
Uh,
very.
we've had- My pleasure, my pleasure.
Yes, Pete says, thank you very much for jumping in and helping us out there, Tom. We appreciate it. That was always informative, as always. So,
I thought I'd concentrate when I do the programs for the children. I can't talk much about their attention span is about 3 seconds. So I got to keep the stories real short. But for y'all, I wanted to try to get some of the better stories in there and let you hear some of the history. Hopefully some of you get interested in it and do it. Now they're beginning to ask me who's going to do it when I can't do it anymore.
I think Ralph said he was going to do it.
I had one fella that could do everything that I did, but he didn't know anything about it. He just had a photographic memory.
Wow.
And that's what he tell the children. He said, I don't know. He said, Tom Green told me what to say.
Hey, it worked for a while.
Tom?
Yeah.
I think you did a flag program years and years ago for the Mckinney chapter. And
Yeah, I
you did.
did.
yeah,
I did. Yeah.
I
I
held
didn't
the,
even know y'all had a chapter up there.
yeah, I held the flags and you did the program.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, actually, Tom went out to visit 2 schools up in McKinney. One
We
was
did,
the,
and one of the children knew about Breeds Hill. And one of them
I'm
knew
sorry?
about who was our first black patriot of the American Revolution? Any of you remember?
well, I think it was an elementary school over in
Christmas.
Princeton.
Yeah,
Christmas
Yeah.
Maddox, and this little black
was,
boy knew the name.
yeah, I went with you on those too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the other school was the private prep school.
Private
and that-
school, yeah. And they weren't any better than the other kids. They weren't as good as I recall.
They appreciated it.
I'm sure they did. I'm glad they did.
Well, and like we said, I mean, we appreciate it also. All right, well, let's move on to the business because it's coming on 8 o'clock now. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 19th. That's the week before Thanksgiving. Still be by Zoom. I have not heard who our speaker will be yet on. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, that's our history teacher. And the CAR will also be present. And we'll have a veteran or two that we're also going to acknowledge for their service. So next meeting should be a good job also. Well, I got a couple other chapters on here, but hopefully as history teacher, we'll be able to whoop them so we can get some points. So we'll see. We'll get into that. The fall BOM is still scheduled for November 13th. It's going to be by Zoom. I don't have any other details at this time. I don't know. Does anybody else have anything on that they want to share?
No, sir.
Okay. There'll be committee meetings will be taking place prior to that. The Color Guard committee meeting I know is we're trying to do November 8th, I think, or November 10th. I'm trying to remember what Commander Rudy wanted to do. So be on the lookout for some of that.
Both nights, he wants to do the 8th and the 10th.
Yeah, I think the 8th though was for only the voting members, and then the 10th was for the general session, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So we've got that going on. Yeah, because we got a T1, we got to support him on that one, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. And that covers pretty much the old business and announcements. For the new business, did everybody take an opportunity to read the minutes on the website? And everybody shake your head yes, because I know you did. All right. In that case, then, I am opening the floor to entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of the last month's meeting.
All right. Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second. It's Ralph.
Thank you, Ralph. Ralph seconds. We now have a motion been seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of accepting the minutes as published, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Looks like the motion carries. Tom, you got by it again. You and your lies, I tell you what.
Again.
They're going to catch you one of these days.
They're going to. Make them read it, I think.
All right. And so now we have Treasurer Thompson. If you could give us a treasurer's report, sir. You're still muted, though.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I've submitted the report to the secretary as well as president of the organization. The bank balance as of the September report was $2,820.59. This month, we received 2 deposits from the Texas Society SAR. On the 8th, there was a deposit of $179 for dues. And on the 9th, there was a deposit of $53 for new member application fees. The current balance in the account is $3,052.59.
All right. And do we have a motion to accept treasurer's report as presented?
Tom Wilson will make that motion.
All right. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Al. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the treasurer report? The only thing
Was that in US dollars?
Well, we're switching over to the yang or the yen or the. Yes, that's in US dollars, I hope. There should be probably next month. We'll have more dues and fees coming from the state to cover it because we had several. We had like 13 new applications just get approved not too long ago. But so those reports are coming in, and I'll get those compiled so Dallas can get their money and Edmund Terrell can get theirs. And Ted, you guys got some of your money, right? Okay. All right. So anyway, we had the motion discussion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, do we accept the motion to wait? All those in favor of the motion to accept the treasurer's report? There we go.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Seeing none, hearing none, motion carries. All right, Ralph, good job.
Thank you.
Sergeant at Arms, do you have our nomination list for the 2021 officers?
Well, it's the same as what was accepted at the last month's meeting.
Okay. I think you sent that to me, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'll make sure I get that out so we have our actual vote in for the next meeting.
I just have one other piece of news, though. I
Okay.
checked my status in terms of information on me that's in the TXR website, and I pulled up my invoice for year 2020. So they are posted for everybody in the chapter if you want to get yours individually.
Okay.
You aware of that?
So David, I've got a comment and a question on that. So I was talking with Bill Hurst and he told me that he'd gone online like we talked about, and he made his payment, you know, his regular payment to his chapter. And then he also has made his dual payment to us. So I wanted to let you know that. He wanted to be sure that he was doing the right thing. And I said, absolutely. If you pay it online, that's wonderful for the dual members. You don't have to, but that's great. One comment that, yeah, or one question I would have, David, is that at some point I need to get the feedback as to who's paid and who's not paid, so I can send out the cards if they didn't get them already. So I don't know how we're going to do that, but anyway, at some point I sort of need to know that.
Sure. And online actually makes it nicer because you can do like 4 chapters, I believe.
Right. Bill said he paid all of his online.
Yeah, and then that way we've got record, and like I said, you don't have to send out a dual, because sometimes some people become a dual member of other chapters. They just walk in and hand them $20 and it's never recorded. The state's not aware of it. And then they go, well, so-and-so is a dual member. Oh, there's no record, you know, so.
I like it, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, online helps out a lot, because I know Van Fossen, he likes to join like 6 chapters or something. I don't know. He's got all
It
that
depends on
money.
what state. It depends on what state I'm in.
The state of spending money.
That's it. Then you got it. Yep.
All right. Does anyone else have any other business they would like to bring to the floor at this moment?
One other flag I had intended to tell you all a little bit about. I'll just give you a little bit. It has 15 stripes. And this was intended to be the American flag that we have today. 15 stars and stripes. Who was the 14th and 15th colony? Do you remember that became? Vermont was the 14th and Kentucky was the 15th. And President Monroe went to Congress and he said, we've started adding a stripe and a flag and a star for every state, and we got a mess. And the windows are all open. He said, over here we got an 8-stripe flag. Over here we got a 9-stripe flag. We got a 10. We got a 15. So he said, how about if we go back to 13 original stripes and have a flag added for each state? So they said, yeah, that's a good idea. So this was supposed to be the flag of the United States. It never was supposed to change.
Oh.
That's a little fact most people never heard before.
I hadn't heard it.
I hadn't either.
It didn't go over very big, as you can imagine.
All right. I guess that's going to cover the business for tonight. Chaplain Babs, do you have a benediction for us?
Yes. Almighty God, we thank you for the opportunity we have had to get here together via this virtual Zoom meeting. As we close our meeting, we again ask that you be with us and keep us safe from the pandemic that's running rampant across our world today. Protect us and our loved ones until we meet again next month. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Good to be with you guys. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Tom.
My
All
pleasure.
right. And if you guys would join us in the recessional, please. Until we meet
Till we
again,
meet again,
let
let
us
us
remember our
remember
obligation
our obligation to our forefathers
Fathers.
who gave us
who
our
gave us our
Constitution.
Constitution,
the Bill of Rights,
Bill of Rights,
and independent
Independent
Supreme
Supreme
Court,
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 and the
and
nation
a
of
nation
free
free men.
of free men.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming and enjoying. Pleasure to see everybody, and we'll hopefully see you next month. I am going to have one more week of training at, I didn't crash today, believe it or not. You got close. We went inverted, but we got out of it.
Were you flying a real one or are you playing the video game version?
Playing the
We
big
had Six Flags.
$18 million video game.
18 million.
Wow.
Those video games cost us. Well, that's cheaper than losing a plane, I guess. Just about.
Yeah, that's a $200 million.
Right. You could crash and walk away from that one, right? The $18 million one.
So anyway, yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. I was mentally burnt when I got home.
I bet.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Enjoyed it. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And look forward to
Thank you,
seeing you next
David.
month.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.